This is MC Fireside Chats, a weekly show devoted to the outdoor hospitality industry, hosted by Brian Searl and Cara, Csizmadia. You'll hear from special guests that focus on topics to help your business succeed, all backed by Modern Campground, the most innovative news source in the industry.
Everybody to another episode of MC Fireside Chats. My name is Brian Searl with Insider Perks, here as always with Cara, Csizmadia from the Canadian Camping and RV Council. We're really excited to have our recurring RV industry and outdoor recreation show for you all today. We've got a couple recurring guests. Hopefully Shane's going to show up. He did email and say, I have 45 minutes. I'm in a rush, and we'll probably be there for the beginning of the show. So maybe he will pop in and join us. We are missing Phil Ingrassia today. He has other commitments, but we do have Eleanore Hamm here from the Canadian RVDA, as well as Susan Carpenter from the RV Women's Alliance, and two guys who you probably don't know because they are really newbies in the industry. They just kind of popped in last week. We were really intrigued by their story, and so we invited them on the show. We like to expose new faces and new people. That's Bob Zagami and John DiPietro from NERVDA and, 25 other things that have all started in the last week, which is really amazing. So do you guys want to introduce yourselves and talk about what you've done in the last 7 days?
Yeah, but now we can add you to the roster, too, that we appeared on your show, Brian.
No, that's not notable at all, sir. That's actually a negative to appear on the show.
That'll hurt us?
Yeah, that's a hurt, yeah.
John and I have been working
Don't tell anybody you were here.
For about 13 years. RV Insights is our consulting company for media and marketing, and I'll let John tell you about our television programs.
That's all you're going to say, Bob?
Yep.
You're going to leave that up to me? Okay, TV shows. We do two national. I guess if you're on the internet, it's national no matter what. But
worldwide. Give yourself credit. It's worldwide.
Well, you know what? You're absolutely correct. Thank you so much, Brian. We do two shows. One is in its 8th year and was kind of started as a lark to see how we would do with it. It's called RVing in New England. But we really need to change the name of it to RVing from New England, because it's not just about RVing in New England anymore. And you know what? That is going great. We do that live every Wednesday night on the Facebook page of the New England RV Dealers Association.
Only 7 years, not 8 years.
Well, going on 8 years. I could say going on 10 years if we're real marketing.
Always round up. Like in high school or college, they told you like 5 and up is round to the nearest, right? So 5
round
is
up.
10.
There you
round
go.
Up.
Yeah.
And the other show that we do is called the Camper Report Show, which airs every week, comes out every Friday on the RV Life Network, a group of RVers of about 2 million people. And we don't do that live. We tape that. Bob kind of does a segment. Well, here's what we do. We introduce ourselves, and we tell the people what we're going to tell them. Then we tell them, and then we told them what we told them. Tell them what we told them. Does that sound right, Bob?
Perfect sense. Yeah, you're crystal clear over here.
And Bob kind of does the part on the industry insider stuff with the corporation presidents, the manufacturing presidents, and that type of thing. And I do the part, which I consider the fun part. I deal with the real campers. So between that and Bob being executive director of the New England RV Dealers Association, the largest multi-state dealer group in the entire United States. And on top of that, we're retired.
Terrible word. Not in our vocabulary.
No,
right.
I'm never going to retire.
We love the
Thanks
industry.
to you, Brian.
I said I'm never going to retire. I'm having too much fun. I think you guys are too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, I'm really. Is that it? Do you have more? I mean, you can keep going if you want.
Brian, he could go on for another hour. You got to stop it there.
All right, I'm going to stop him there. But really, I'm very impressed with all the things that you guys have done. I think I met you for the first time, and we were discussing before the show 2020, I think at the Boston RV show, just in person. But I've obviously known of you. I've been in the industry since 2012, and just really impressed with all the things that you guys do, all the contributions to the industry. I think you're right about RVing in New England. And I don't catch the show as often as I should be able to, given my schedule. Same thing with Camper Report. But from what I've seen of the episodes, great, well put together, really valuable industry resources. And I hope you guys continue for a long time.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the kind words.
Yeah. So what do we have? What do we want to discuss in the RV industry today? Like, what's going on?
Maybe Bob wants to discuss, because we attended several shows. Maybe he wants to.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what? There's media reports out there saying that the figures are going down, normalizing. But I'm sure Bob would tell you, and Eleanore as well, because they're on that side of the industry, that the enthusiasm at the shows, I've never seen it any higher, and the diversity in the demographics is absolutely amazing. Would you all agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think and it goes beyond the shows. What we've seen, we had a tremendous show in Boston in January, and it's carried over. And I think for the most part, the dealers that we talked about here in the Northeast, the crowds are still good. I mean, I'll talk to dealers in the middle of the week on a Tuesday or something, and they'll say, "I can't believe it. I've got 10 people in the showroom on a Tuesday afternoon." And the weekends are very popular. Now, the interesting thing is they're selling almost as much as they were. It's down maybe 10, 20%. There's less people coming, but the people who are coming are buyers. And we've broadened the demographics of our industry right now have been broadened from everything from a 19-year-old kid getting out of high school and hopping in a camper van to, mature retired couples. So we have products that fit every classification, and within the products we've got.
But if you're retired, it doesn't necessarily mean they're mature, though.
Well, we've proven that.
Yeah.
We can prove that.
Retired, immature people are now hitting the highways more than ever before.
I mean, you got to recruit them from anywhere you can. That's why Bob's on a beach right now, recruiting tourists at resorts, right? For
Florida.
Buy RVs.
Yeah. Florida. I'm not doing any more winters in New England ever again.
Aren't you seeing more ethnicity too? I know I went camping last year because right now, obviously, it's too cold to camp. But I was really blown away, and I absolutely love to see so many different walks of life in the campground that, I hate to say this, but it's notoriously always been that the white class sitting out in the campground, and now it's not like that at all. And I absolutely love it. It's so great to see.
Well, Susan, you bring up an excellent point, and Bob introduced me to a gentleman who started a organization called Black Folks Camp 2.
Yes.
Bob, maybe you want to talk about our friend
Earl Hunter. Yeah,
Earl.
We've known Earl since his days at Sylvan Sport, and it's a great organization. And he's now hooking up with associations also, in addition to the companies that are representing him. In fact, I just signed a partnership agreement with Earl that we'll be announcing in the next, I think, 2 weeks.
I mean, you just announced it, Bob.
Actually, you just announced it.
Yeah, you just announced it.
You just announced it, Bob.
Great. But don't tell anybody.
That's okay. Nobody watches the show anyway, so you're saying.
Right. So
But, I seen Spanish people. I had a young Japanese couple, and how we argue when we're backing in something, they were arguing too, but in the language I didn't understand, but the body language was exactly the same.
Yeah.
So it sounds different in Japanese, but the intent is the same.
Oh, backing up. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they know how to swear in different languages.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a marriage tester regardless of your language.
For the most part, that carries over to the shows also. We're seeing a lot more diversity in the shows, which is good. Now, the industry is doing a good job at, reaching out to Blacks and Hispanics. So we are seeing a lot of that. We had a lot more this year, there were years, to your point, Susan, that you wouldn't see a Black person in the Boston show. It was crazy. But, they love it as much as we do. And what Earl is doing is creating a welcoming environment for people to invite other people into the lifestyle. So I think it's all good for the industry.
Yeah, we've had Earl on the show before. We had a diversity-focused episode, I think maybe a year and a half ago, Cara, something like that. But he was really...
It's a time warp now. I can't even remember the order, but yeah, it was a bit ago. We should have him back, I think. It's worth the conversation given, I know up here we definitely have events and strategies targeting new campers, new demographics. It's something we're absolutely focusing on, and so I think it's a good conversation.
Well, I always knew where to find Earl at the show, because whenever he was doing a presentation, he would have a crowd around him. You couldn't get through the aisles because he's so dynamic in his presentations and his enthusiasm for the lifestyle and for any product that he's selling. And he's not selling, he's really converting people, and he just does a fantastic job. So we love to have him on.
Yeah, he's a very passionate man about it.
Yep. When we were in Florida for Tampa for the Florida RV show in January, I ran into a couple called Adventuresome Couple. No, wait a minute. Yeah, is it them, or am I mixing them up with another one from Alliance?
It's them now, so we'll just roll with it.
Yeah, I think it's called Adventuresome Couple.
There is something like that, yeah.
They're from Georgia or Alabama, somewhere down there, but they're full-timers. They're all over the place. And, the thing is, when you're in a campground, it's not black campers, white campers, Hispanic campers. It's campers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, if the rest of the world was trying to look at a way to, welcome diversity, I don't know if that's the right word or not, use the campground industry as an example, because I'm sure you would all agree that, there's no black and white at a campground. It's
no, and I think that's the value of what Earl is doing, right? And certainly I'm definitely not an authority to speak on this, but I feel like the industry as a whole has always been, to a greater extent, inclusive. It's just getting that message out more, so that, and obviously there are people who aren't, right? They're very small, few and far between, but getting that message out to say that campers are campers.
Yeah, I mean, Janine Pettit's another one that's revolutionizing. Women going out on their own too, and not needing, the guy to drive the truck and to back the RV in. But, what's really neat about when you talk about, that community in a campground, it's almost like it used to be, that you don't see color, you don't see income bracket, you don't see any of that. And if your neighbor is struggling with something, you go over and help them. It's just like it used to be. That's the way it should be, is you go over and help. And you strike up a conversation, and, everybody's friend. Nobody, there's no barriers in a campground.
And, Susan, you talk about that socioeconomic misconception in a campground. But now you run into every different walk of life in a campground. And the reality is, if you were having trouble with your unit and you needed help, wouldn't you prefer to the person next to you to be an electrician, mechanic, or carpenter rather than an accountant or a college professor? They ain't going to help you.
It depends on what kind of trouble you run into.
Well, I was just going to say,
generally speaking,
camping, and you're having trouble with your awning, and they know awnings. Accountants know awnings.
Yeah.
Or like your awning is angled at the wrong degree, and it needs a math calculation to figure out the raise of
30 degrees instead of 40.
Maybe an accountant. So,
or it's windy and you left it out and left, and so your neighbor went over, and as long as it wasn't
valuable,
inside, they put it up.
Don't knock accountants.
Eleanor, you're just taking this all in, aren't you?
I'm just, laughing at your, hopefully we don't have too many accountants watching, because they might take offense, but I'm sure accountants count too. No, it's a lot of, it's really interesting, because we talk at our, GoRV Canada and our marketing strategies on how to attract, new Canadians, right, to the industry. And I think it's communicating and getting the message out there of exactly what you guys are saying. Everybody's equal, everybody's out there, people will help you, and trying to get through the potential objections, or people not quite understanding what camping is. So we work very hard in marketing and with Parks Canada to try to get different people coming into the industry, so that hopefully they may start camping in a tent, but then eventually move into the RV lifestyle as well.
That gradual.
I think presentation is so valuable too, in all that marketing strategy, where you see that really diverse representation within ad campaigns and things like that. That's something I'm definitely seeing in my Instagram feed and things like that, a much more diverse population represented camping visually in those places. And I think that's really helpful too.
Well, and again, that has to be like a conscious decision, right? And I don't think it's an unconscious decision to say like, we're not going to include those people in our photos. But
Right.
previously, like I mean, we have a subscription to Shutterstock for our marketing agency for all the people we do work for. And, 4 or 5 years ago, that's all you would find in camping related stock photos is that. And so unless you were willing, it's not that you were intentionally excluding anybody, but you just didn't have the resources maybe, or didn't put the thought into, oh, well, maybe this should be different. And I think that's part of what Earl and other people are helping change is everything you look at under a microscope to say, like, how can I be more inclusive?
Well, the other thing that helped us out, if there was any good that came out of COVID, it was the exposure to the RV industry, to the masses of people that truly didn't understand it. They may have known that their neighbor had a trailer in the backyard or rented a motorhome for vacation, but the penetration over a 2-year period, the media covers, the different stories that people had. And that's why when I talk to analysts and stuff, I don't think we'll ever see the impact of the recession of 2008 to 2012 again, because the base is so much larger now. And so many people know it. It's mainstream. And once you're mainstream, you don't go back because people talk about it. I mean, there isn't a family in this Canada or United States that if they sit down right now and say, what do you want to do this summer? And they might talk about going to Disney or taking a cruise or taking an airplane, but you can bet your life that RVs are in that conversation. It's on the same level. And they know people who have done it. They know people that purchased during COVID. So the expansiveness of that is going to bring a lot more inclusivity to the industry.
But is it just I know we're talking about RVs in the show, right? But is it just RVs, or is it the inclusivity of glamping and the more luxurious accommodations that are bringing in different demographics too?
Well, I think the coverage that we've gotten has covered everything from tents to glamping.
Yes.
So there's been enough of that. So people, and that's a good point, Brian, because a lot of people think, well, they're just trailers and motorhomes. No, there's a lot more activity, in when you get to the campgrounds with the covered wagons and the yurts and park models and the stuff that we have. So they're seeing the industry on a much higher level. And so they're intrigued about what the different components are.
I mean, you think about it, if there's nowhere else out there that you could go and say, you got such variety. You could either rough it out in a tent without any utilities in the middle of nowhere, or you can go up to this multi-million-dollar unit that has more than your house does, and everything in between. Where else can you experience so much in one industry?
You absolutely can't. There's no way you can, and it's future-proof. Like, it doesn't matter what you imagine in the future with or with the future tech or AI evolving or what. Like, there's going to be camping and glamping on Mars. There's going to be like glamping accommodations that float above the earth in a bubble. Like, I mean, whether that's 300 years from now, I don't know. But my point is that can be adapted. Our industry can be adapted to fit almost anything, whereas hotels are kind of in a narrower box.
Oh, totally narrower box.
Oh yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story that hits close to home, and every time I tell this story, people just their eyeballs roll to the back of their head. But don't worry, it's a clean story. My two daughters are 45 and 41.
They don't want to hear. They don't want you saying that publicly, Zagami.
Remember, nobody watches the show, so they won't.
Well, they're not watching. So the only way they know, John, is if you email and said, "Look what your dumb dad did on a program this week."
I will.
So we were getting together and talking last year. Now they know Dad's been an RVer for 40 years. I know a little bit about the industry, and we started talking about what they were going to do for vacation. And my youngest one says, "Well, we just got back from glamping." That's really, and we didn't know they were going, but they went to Terramore up in Acadia, and they had a wonderful time. And my other one says, "Well, I'm taking Bobby to auto camp on Cape Cod next week." So his two adult children, if you will, that without any assistance from Dad, without asking Dad anything, do you know anybody at KOA? Do you know anybody at Airstream? No. This generation, they were so thrilled with what they were seeing in the marketplace during COVID that they made a decision on their own to enter into the lifestyle without ever saying anything to mom and dad, and yet knowing my experience in the industry. And they said, Dad, we have good jobs. It's nice, but we can afford it and we can do it. And they did it. And they went to glamping areas without saying, do you have a recommendation for a campground or should we rent an RV? They didn't need any assistance. And that's when I look at the broadening of the marketplace, I think that's a fantastic story. Mm-hmm. Because if it can happen that close in a family that's been camping for 40 years, that has an integrated into the RV industry, just think of all the people that we don't know who are having that same conversation, whose kids are doing the same thing, and we wouldn't have even counted them in the industry 2 years ago.
Let me go back to something that Susan just said a few moments ago about the wide variety of people that are camping now, whether it's a tent, a pop-up, a travel trailer, or a 45-foot diesel pusher with electric floors and, et cetera, et cetera.
I love the specifics.
Yeah. The one thing that they have in common, not in the methodology of how they camp, it's the campfire. Because every one of those people, at some time during that camping experience, whether it's a week or a weekend, they're getting around that campfire. And when you get around the campfire, the demographics are gone. It's the magic of looking through that campfire and seeing your kids, whether they're 41 and 45 years old or your grandkids that are 4 and 5 years old, the magic that they have. In fact, Brian, even in your intro, there was quite a bit. It was toasting marshmallows and there was campfires.
Well, I mean, we are called Fireside Chats, so.
Well, that's exactly right. I guess it's video appropriate.
That's my favorite place to be, camping. I mean, I raised my kids camping, so my favorite thing was, other than when it rained, my daughter loved when it rained because that meant we all got stuck indoors and we played games. But sitting around that campfire, other than, we've kind of lost that sitting around the dinner table. Well, now it's the campfire where you sit around, you catch up, you connect, you talk, you connect. And multi-families will sit around the campfire and just enjoy the outdoors.
Good point.
Better.
I know with the groups that we camp with a couple times a year, people that camp and revolve around a charity, they'll get some campfires going, and everybody, you bring your chair, starting at 9 o'clock at night, and then little by little, people start dropping off as they can't stay awake anymore. But the magic of the campfire is whether it's 90 degrees out or 45 degrees out, that campfire, just think of the sparkle. And I don't mean the snap, crackle, and pop, but just the light in the kids' eyes, in that kids, regardless of what age they are. It's
just
kind of amazing.
How close you sit to it.
Yep. Yeah. And it's an international thing because when we've gone north of the border up to Canada, same thing. You don't know that, you're leaving New York and going into Ontario. You don't know you're leaving Montana and going into Alberta. You don't know you're leaving Oregon or Washington and going into BC.
Some of my favorite stories is, for the longest time, my son lived in Michigan. We lived in Buffalo, New York. So for the 4th of July weekend, we'd meet halfway in between. And so we'd spend our 4th of July in Canada, which
everything was open.
I mean, it wasn't as crowded, but they have some beautiful provincial parks, like right on the lake and stuff like that. So we would just kind of laugh that we fled the country for the 4th of July.
4th of July, yeah.
It was, their campgrounds are, I would equate them to like the New England campgrounds, that they're very wooded and they're beautiful and well kept.
I have to say, when I was a campground owner, the 4th of July was one of my top weekends. I had tons of Americans every year for 4th of July come. We always did a big dinner event and live music and all of that stuff. It was a big driver for me. The timing fell nicely with the Calgary Stampede right after. It always starts
Canada Day too, so
we would do one after the other. We'd have Canada Day, then 4th of July, and then Stampede would start. Those were big drivers of traffic for me back in those days. And the 4th of July party was always very well
We
attended.
should get Bob and John up here for Stampede. I think they would enjoy it.
When is it?
It's in July. It's the greatest outdoor show on earth.
Yeah.
July 7th to the 16th.
Yeah.
Huge.
It's huge. Yeah. And actually our board is meeting, the RVDA of Canada National Board's meeting in Calgary on July 6th, just so that people can stay and potentially go to the Stampede. So.
Am I invited to that meeting? Do I? I'm here.
Well, you're in Calgary. We might have to have you make a presentation.
I don't know about that. I'm getting nervous on camera.
Oh, okay. But no, it's a great opportunity if you guys, anybody from the South wants to ever come up. I mean, Cara knows more about it because she's from Calgary, but really, really a huge, looks like a fabulous event.
Well, when you're in New England, your Canadian affiliation is Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, PEI, and you go out west to Ontario. You got Quebec and Ontario, and then after that, I'm not as I'm geographically challenged, but definitely.
I think half of New England thinks that Canada stops at Montreal. They don't realize it extends across the whole.
I mean, I feel like they could say the same thing about the United States, that it stops at like Ohio.
Right.
Maybe.
And then it go to California.
Yeah, Ohio. That's how it works, right? I mean, it's been a long time since I was in social studies, but.
So, Cara, let me ask you this. With the summer of 20 being closed borders and 21 being closed borders, I think the Canadians, because I think in 21 the Canadians could come into the U.S., right? The snowbirds could they go down to Florida?
I believe starting in 2021 they could.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. Actually, I think
it was late
2022.
2021. I think they opened it, but you still, I think, had to have like a vaccination or something.
There were sort of workarounds. It was closed to non-essential travel, I believe, till January of
22.
Yeah, essentially. Well, November, because I'm trying to think. We had our conference. I mean, I did go to the RVDA in November of 2021. So, but you still had to do testing. So it was all the testing before and after quarantining. So it definitely impacted people's travels, but it was great for domestic tourism. In Canada.
Right. We did lots of interviews with Canadian publications. About how the Canadians really, I think it was harder to get from the U.S. to go north than it was the other way around. So your campground owners were saddled with more restrictions on the U.S. market than I think the other way around, if I recall.
Yes. We're really, right now, 2023 is really the first year we're not held back in any sort of significant limitation way. We're expecting an international market to reopen. All the RV rental agencies are amping up and gearing up inventory and all of that, and seeing significant booking numbers. So the international market is reopening to operators up here. And then I think there's a significant amount of strategy around welcoming back our American guests. I know I was talking to a park that's on the Alaska Highway, and they're seeing lots of bookings for Americans heading back up that way that they haven't seen for 3 years. My park was roughly 35% of my guests at my park were from Europe. They were from Germany, the Netherlands.
Right.
And so that was a significant blow to that business during COVID. And so I think they are now, the park is still there. I'm not involved anymore, but I think they are definitely now looking forward to welcoming back those guests, and that will have a significant boom to their bottom line that they've lost out on the last handful of years.
I think you bring up a good point. I don't think we've seen as much coverage on the international and the European travelers as we have Americans going to Canada or Canadians coming down here. Tonight on our show, we've got Ali Rasmussen from Spacious Skies. And one of her campgrounds is Minuteman, which is about 20 miles outside of Boston. And about a third of their guests each summer are international travelers.
Yep.
And when you combine that, as that starts to pick up now too, because we didn't talk about that as another revenue source after COVID. But that and all the restrictions being off, there's talk down here in Florida that if somebody's thinking about coming down to Florida to snowbird this year, they can almost forget it. The parks are so full. The parks down here are now taking reservations for 2024, winter of 2024, and so that's going to be an issue, and people talk about it. We sound like a broken record every week but we talk about it on both of our shows, to make your reservations early. I don't know from that side of the table, what can these campgrounds do to make people understand that you have to make these reservations early? Are we preaching to a blank wall, or are you seeing activity where people are truly doing it? I think most campgrounds are ahead.
I think this is very market dependent too, right? Because we work with 400 plus campgrounds just on the marketing side of Insider Perks. And I think that there's no doubt that Florida is exactly as you're describing, right? And I think a lot of the tourist areas are still filling up. I think it's a little like hit and miss, though, given the way the economy has been trending in some of the other areas of the country. It's certainly not a negative anywhere, but sometimes it's a negative from 21.
And folks are booking with less time in advance.
Yes.
Yeah, and in some of those areas, and I think, from the campground side, it is tough to communicate that to folks to pre-book. I think the market, like Brian is saying, really dictates the consumer behavior. If you want to get into those parks, you got to book early, and if you don't, you're missing the bus.
So I think that's what I'm saying is that's negatively impacting. I think they were doing good in 2021 or 22, sorry, because they learned from 21. Yeah. But now the economy is causing them to have to wait and see and maybe put off, and they'll still go camping.
Right.
But that booking window is shorter, so then there's going to be a big rush, and then it's going to be the same problem again that they had in 21. That there's not going to be anything full.
Well, to kind of alleviate that problem in Florida, at least, what Zagami hasn't told you, but I have spies that have told me, he is currently painting his house bright yellow and has got 2 hookups in the front yard. And he was on the phone with Toby O'Rourke today, trying to become a KOA property.
Smart strategy, branding. I like it.
I can fit 2 of you in the driveway. Yeah.
I mean, it really makes sense because KOA's got Terramore at the high end, right? And then they've got their resorts and holidays and journeys. And really, there's an entry point level there, I think, for the 2 spots.
Driveways.
Of the house, yeah.
Driveways.
I think kind of like Harvest Host.
Well, he doesn't qualify as a Harvest Host because he doesn't have a gift shop.
Ah.
Oh. But you bring that up, but it does, while some campgrounds are going to be full and there's going to be limited space, it does bring opportunities for other types. I'm not necessarily saying Bob's driveway, but for the other campgrounds that potentially would have less traffic, or are not at one of the big, they're not in Banff or Jasper, they're in different areas. It really opens up the opportunity because people are now wanting to go camping. They're looking for places to camp, and now these campgrounds can say, hey, have you thought about here? And it will bring more exposure and potentially, bring people to camp in different areas that they haven't necessarily gone to before. So
it really isn't a terrible idea. Like, it wouldn't make financial sense, I don't think, for a KOA, but it really doesn't. It really isn't a bad idea. Like just pretending playing on KOA Express, that is, 5 to 20 sites or something like that, right?
But Brian,
it still is very high standard and quality.
One of the stories that we're going to talk about tonight, as we tape our camper report show this week, is that Love's Truck Stops, LOVES, are now building RV hookups. They've got 30 properties with about 360 sites throughout the country. They're not just in one area. And they just want to get that camper who's going from one place to another. They just want hookups. And Brian, the thing that I know, because I've used them myself, is the Ohio Turnpike has 8 properties going east and west that have RV hookups at their rest areas. And Love's, and I've heard that even there are some Marriott properties that are considering putting in some.
Of course, there are. It's such a super low barrier to entry, right?
Yeah,
you've already got the infrastructure, you've already got restaurants, and you've got shops at Love's, and they'll spend more money.
It's brilliant. It really is a brilliant idea. And for one of those people that would be going on a long trip, and spending the night in a Walmart parking lot or Love's. And it's not that we didn't want to stop at a campground. One, sometimes availability wasn't there.
Yep. Or you're too far off the road.
Yeah, and it's too far off the road. And two is if you're driving till like 10 o'clock at night and all you want to do is sleep like 6 hours, hours or whatever before you get back on the road to get into a campground and all that kind of stuff tends to be quite the hassle.
Right.
And, we're talking a quick overnight. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world because people are already doing it. So,
somebody brought up Harvest Host, but we've had Joel Holland on our show several times. And he is the first one to admit that he is not in competition with RV
He's been
parks.
on our show and said the same thing. Yeah, and I agree with him.
He's complimenting them, and they've come out with this camper card just a couple weeks ago that it's a discount card for RV facilities. There's the card right there. Campers.
I think he was. I don't know how many weeks ago was it. Were you on that show, Cara? But he was on here talking about Campers Card, and we did a little grilling of Joel, but we ended up on the same page where we think it's a good idea.
Yep. So. And now he just bought a property in England called Brit Camp or something like that.
Joel did?
Yep. Yeah. Brit Stays, I think it is. Yeah, it's comparable to Harvest Host in England.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, yeah. Okay, company. I thought you meant he bought like a campground or something.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. I
talk about a person who is an innovative marketer.
Yeah.
Then when he, I don't know if you guys are any of you members or stayed at
to afford an RV. I'm waiting for NERVDA to sponsor my show, and then I'll be able to afford it.
He bought the golf course thing. So now there's like 300 to 400 golf courses. Now you say, well, what do RVers? Are they golfers? Not necessarily, but golf courses have parking lots, big parking lots that are not used at night. And they also have great dining. So at night, you can have a meal in the clubhouse, sleep in the parking lot, and then in the morning, because golfers start early, they usually have great breakfasts. I mean, that's just
and
a great idea.
The tea before everybody else.
And they're quiet. They're quiet as well.
And statistically, there's more campers than there are campsites available. So it's not like you're taking business away.
Nope.
You are helping the industry as a whole for those that are getting aggravated because they can't get somewhere. So, if it was flipped, then I could see a little bit more of a, aggressiveness between all the different companies that are coming up with innovative ideas. But for now, I think it's brilliant.
One of this we talked through with Joel, right? Where I think it's just a lack of understanding on the part of some campground owners, how their guests get there, who they are, what they're looking for, the different types of camping they do throughout the year. They might go to Harvest Host and then come to a private campground or, stop on the same trip. So I think a lot of it is just I don't understand my market demographic because I don't look at the analytics of the data or understand the marketing. And so therefore I don't understand that my guests might complement each other very well, or they're not pulling or stealing from me or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to camp at a Love's truck stop.
No, for sure not.
You can stop and sleep. But I hear
now at a golf course, maybe.
Yeah, but you hear some of these campgrounds complain about Harvest Host or somebody sleeping in a Walmart. On your show, have you had anybody that addresses an area that John and I have talked about before? Is why aren't more campgrounds starting up an RV service center on the campground? It's a tremendous revenue source. Now, my dealers don't like it when I say that, but the fact of the matter is, we have a campground in Connecticut, Lone Oaks Campsites, that has not only a service department, they got 3 service technicians. There are people who make reservations in the campground to go on vacation in that campground so that they can have their RV repaired. It's a ready-made audience. You don't have to advertise. You just make sure that it's out there and that people know about it. Everything is automated. They get everything on an iPad. You go up and say, I need a new awning installed, or can you fix my brakes or something? You go out for the day. The service techs go down. You come home at night. They give you an iPad. You sign off on it. You pay them. John and I did a presentation once to through one of the associations here. We didn't even get a question at the end. They looked at us like we had eyeballs in the back of our head. But if I'm a campground owner, which I'm not, and I'm looking for additional revenue sources, and yeah, there's other competition or what have you, this is money dropped at your doorstep. Have you guys covered that at all, or
we have, like, I remember the conversation coming up because we had talked to Kurt from RVTI about techs and, you know, the ability for them to be flexible and do, you know, there's a shortage of them, obviously, his efforts to train them. And I feel like at some point it's come up. Cara, like, I feel like we definitely have. Maybe not an expert in that or that campground owner who already has that. But I know it's been brought up about having repair guys who stay at campgrounds and are available at least, maybe not for the day.
I know of many campgrounds who have great kind of relationships and partnerships with like mobile techs and things like that. There are several limitations, I think, up here that maybe don't apply in other areas of the world, but you know, we have significant RV tech shortage up here. I'll maybe let Eleanor touch on some of that because I think she's got
the dealer side.
Well, I mean, from the dealers, obviously, we have a huge shortage. I mean, it's North America wide, right, in terms of having technicians. So, you know, the dealers are always looking for people. The other thing, too, is that we do have some pretty strict provincial standards. So in Alberta, for example, where Cara is, you need to either we have a program called the Red Seal certification for all trades in Canada. And we have a national occupational standard for the RV service technician. And so in Alberta, you either need to be licensed as an apprentice or have your journeyman papers. So it's actually, you know, it's illegal to just be a tech and not be one of those two things in the province of Alberta, and it's a designated trade in every province. So, you know, we want to just make sure that if people are technicians, they need to be working at a dealership, they need to be registered in the apprenticeship program, they need to be going to school. Once they have their papers and their journeyman, yes, potentially they can be mobile techs, but it just, you know, we just have to be careful of
Do you have independent and mobile techs up there?
We do have some. Yeah, we do have some. Not as many, I think, as there are in the U.S. Obviously, we have, you know, fewer people up here anyways. Most of them are affiliated with dealerships. And actually, we do find that some of the campgrounds, while they have mobile techs, a lot of those techs may be affiliated with a dealership. And we always recommend, for many reasons, that dealers get to know the campground operators in their region. And that would be definitely
Eleanor. Eleanor, we've never discussed what we're going to talk about on this show, but Bob and I spoke at a conference
Northeast Campground
4 or 5 years ago, and we had campground owners there and some people from Elkhart, and we asked about the relationship between dealers and campground owners, and they looked at us like, are you crazy? Why would we want that? Well, what do you do with your RV after you buy it from the dealer? You go to a campground, okay? And how much interaction, how much speaking, talking, communication is there between the dealer and the campground? It may be different in Canada, but there's very little in the U.S.
And you know, and you're right. And one of the things when the dealers, when they see me writing about that or talking about that, they get upset. But then I say to them, you don't understand that we're all part of this, you know, ecosystem. And it's nice that we sell them as dealers, but their first impression of what the lifestyle is like is going to be in a campground. So the ills of what got them into the campground. So when their RV doesn't work or it leaks or the awning doesn't go in, they're going to go to the office. And they think, because they may not know about the industry, that you've got people sitting there just waiting to fix your RV.
I mean, they might at a Love's.
Yeah, huh? I wouldn't be surprised if Love takes that one more step because they have it for trucks. But wouldn't it make a lot of sense? I mean, and then the campground owner, and they beat up on us pretty well. But the campground owner that has a frustrated guest who can't get service will say to them, well, call your dealer and see what they say. And it could be a local dealer. And the local dealer is not going to go out. Most of our dealers do not have mobile techs. So we have a lot more mobile techs. But the dealer who just sold you something isn't going to go out to the campground to fix it 3 weeks later because he's busy trying to make money in the shop and he doesn't have enough people. So they need to, yeah. What's that?
The wait is long too. And I got to admit, so we're doing RV technician classes throughout the country right now. We just did Texas, we have Oregon, Elkhart, Florida, and Pennsylvania still to go. And we've had a couple campgrounds either go through the class or they are signed up to do the class. And true to what John and Bob are saying is some of these campground owners are saying, one of the questions we ask to qualify for the class is, what are you going to do with your technician training? And the campground owner says, I want to service my customers that are in the campground. So if they have an issue, that we as a campground can offer that service. So I think there's a grumbling, a good start to that. I know you guys talked about it 45 years ago, but I think people are starting to realize that this is going to be needed, because whether they get at the campground, something breaks, the local dealer can't take care of them, or if they can, they're 6 weeks out, they can't wait that long, they're not going to stay in the campground that long. There's got to be a solution there, and I think some campgrounds are starting to see that light.
I tell you, I think the push here, honestly, is going to be the economy declining and the need to differentiate your campground from someone else's.
Yep.
And whether that's with an RV tech or a repair bay, or whether that's with a new accommodation or serving cookies at the counter or whatever it is, right? For what, since 2010, right? When the economy started recovering from 2008, and really like we were kind of recession proof, right?
Yep.
Let's assume that. We've been going up, and there hasn't really been a problem. You just open your campground and you're basically full, unless you do a terrible job or you're really grumpy. So I think it's just the same thing we're seeing in marketing, right? We're getting calls from people who didn't call us for the last 7 or 8 years because they were just full and didn't think they needed marketing.
Right.
So I think that's part of the push.
They didn't have to advertise. They didn't have to market. Right. They just
Brian, you're a marketing guy, and you brought up a very, very important point. And regardless of what industry you're in or what type of business you're in, the big question is, what makes you, you? Mm-hmm. How do you differentiate yourself from everything else out there? And if you pick up any kind of camping directory and you look at, they all kind of look the same. But what is it that makes your facility different? Is it the smile on the person that they greet when they first come in? Does the person look like they just came out from under a rock for 3 years? And
it doesn't have to be a huge difference maker. It has to make you memorable.
Right.
Well, the first thing they can start at, and John and I talk about when we talk to campgrounds in the campground associations, we bring this up and they don't like it. But the first thing they have to start doing is take down the sign at the front entrance. When you show up and it says, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, they give you 10 or 12 reasons to piss you off before you even go to the front office.
Then it says, welcome.
We could have a whole show on this, guys, because I agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. So those are the little things, yeah.
I think all of us here are under the impression, but the mindset that operating your campground in the next 5 years has got to be different than the last 10 years, because I always chuckle when I hear someone say, we really love camping, and when we retire, we want to own a campground and take it easy. Cara,
I've had, in the 12 years I ran a park, I had multiple times weekly, my guests saying to me, oh my God, this is the dream life. You're so lucky. I want to do this when I retire and whatever. And yeah, I always had to laugh at it.
Yep. And, the reality is, what are you going to do to differentiate yourself? And if you keep doing the same things, because now the marketing is totally different. The market is totally different. It's not the retiree that wants the 40-foot Class A gas or diesel pusher. 5 years ago, if you said, I want to buy a Class B, people would, number one, they'd laugh at you, and the other half would say, what's a Class B?
Yeah. And the others,
now you can buy a Travato.
And the others wouldn't know where to get them because most of our dealers wouldn't carry them.
Told them, yeah.
But this is part of needing to differentiate yourself because of the economy, and that's going to kickstart a lot of it. But the other part of it is that technology is going to force a lot of this to change. And we talked about it on the show before, but the way they find your campground in search is about to change automatically. Exactly. You're not going to have 10 blue links. So if you're number 4, not that answer in Bing, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, and there are some websites out there.
Yeah. The shifting demographics, I think, are going to drive a lot of this too. As we see the demographic shift, the things they expect and want and desire from their camping experience are going to shift as well. And we have to stay on top of all of those things and find our niche within that expanding list.
I found my niche. I'm just going to talk about AI forever. And eventually they'll be like, oh, that's interesting. But
literally can have no other conversation than that.
I just wish they had that when I was in college having to do term papers. That would have saved a lot of time.
They just came out with 4.0 too, which is we thought 3.5 was.
Well, we've only talked about ChatGPT.
I was happy to have a 2.0.
Yeah, it's AI stuff.
Eleanor gets that.
I'm not gonna play this whole thing. I'm curious. Just because we're talking about it for a second, I'm not going to play this whole thing, but I prepared this video earlier just in case we ran out of things to talk about, which obviously I was stupid for thinking that with John and Bob on the show.
Zagami and DiPietro
and I'm not going to play the whole thing, but check this out. We're going to do this maybe in the future if you guys like this, if we run out of ideas for the show.
I'm so glad to see you all again on another episode of MC Fireside Chats. Brian asked me to briefly suggest some possible conversation starters for this episode based on recent articles in Modern Campground. Before I do, though, welcome to the show, Bob and John. Glad to have you. A pleasure to see our recurring week 4 guests as well, Eleanore, Shane, and Susan. Okay, here we go. We've got 4 fascinating news stories that could spark some great conversation today. Let's dive in. The RV Industry Association has created a sustainability committee aiming to promote eco-friendly practices within the industry. This is a response to growing consumer demand for sustainable products. What are your thoughts on the industry's environmental impact and the efforts to go green?
So I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I had like 3 more stories as conversation starters. So that's possible. That's all AI.
Yep.
It still creeps me out. Like his mouth with the robot boy.
His mouth is a little bit off, but the voice is real. The voice is really real.
Yeah.
The voice is real.
I can't tell. It's
Because we use it for all of our podcasts. Not that
You
voice.
hear the latest? Somebody input all their information and it did its person's taxes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna put hundreds of thousands of people out of work. I know I put my bio in there because my son he gave me a limited account on the 4.0 because he's still a beta tester for them. So he gets a little bit ahead of everybody else. I put my bio in there because I wanted it to sound more professional. It rewrote it for me.
Change your name?
Oh, no, it did change my name, but wow, it made me sound so much more professional.
So you mailed it out and you got 5 new job offers.
Yeah, no, it wasn't my resume. It was just my bio.
No.
But just simple words it changed on there, and I'm like, why didn't I think of that? It's incredible.
It's all about the time saving. Like it will eventually eliminate some jobs. It will also create new jobs, but it's going to enhance our productivity more than anything. And the problem that a lot of people are going to run into is they don't know the tech. Yeah. And so you're already seeing it. Like you need experience with ChatGPT to apply for this job. Like it's already all over the place.
Yeah.
Because they know if they hire somebody with ChatGPT experience, they can do in 40 hours what somebody else would take 60 or 80 hours to do.
Yeah.
I used it to write a description. I'm planning my 20-year high school reunion right now. I used it to write an event description.
What did you say? 20-year?
20 years. Jeez.
Yeah. And it was fascinatingly hilarious. There was all these like early 2000s references throughout the whole thing. It was genius. Like it did it in 90 seconds. Not even.
Did you see what, like, do you guys use Microsoft Office 365? Did you see what they announced last week?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like that, if you haven't seen that, Bob and John, go look at the YouTube video. Like they're going to integrate it in all their products. So you can talk to an Excel spreadsheet and ask for financial data and you can compare that and do a hypothetical and it'll create a chart for you. It'll generate all the stuff in Word. You can text and say, here's a press release, attach the press release file, create a PowerPoint for me, and it will do it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is going to change and it's coming fast.
Yeah.
And
It's very fast. Just look at the last 2 or 3 months since it started to get out there and people started to really play around with it and see what it could do.
Yeah,
you know, a long time to get there, but it's just incredible. I mean, this is my son's field of expertise in some aspects, and it's just, he's been talking about it for 10 years, and I'm like, yeah. And he's like, now everybody understands it, now everybody wants to know about it. He's like, well, where were you 10 years ago when I was trying to tell you about it and nobody believed me?
Right. Well, that's the thing, but there's other benefits to it too, right? Like we've done, I don't know, Bob and John, if you've seen, we did Campy, the bot or whatever, we put on Verde Ranch RV Resort in Arizona as a test. And he's still there. He does really well. And we're going to launch that for our clients who have websites soon. But it, like, we can train it on all the refund policies and cancellation items and every single thing about your park. And then it will actually have really good conversations with you. I looked at a log one time yesterday where somebody named Sharon messaged and said, hey, I'm going to be late for my stay at 5:30. She's doing this with the AI. I didn't realize it was an AI. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Sharon. That's so great. We're ready to welcome you whenever you get here. And our late checkout office, like, it's just completely flawless. It will compare and contrast cabins, even if you don't program it to. It's 24/7 reservations. I was doing the math the other day. Like we charge, I don't know what we're going to charge for it, but it ended up being, I think we're going to charge like $500 a month for the bot, and $500 for a website is what we charge normally. But if you take a part-time worker who makes $15 an hour and you save half of his day, not necessarily cutting his hours, but redirecting him to more valuable activities.
Do other stuff.
Yeah.
And that's $1,200 a month that you're basically saving, which means to have us do your website and your chatbot and have one, you're earning $200 a month.
Well, and given the labor shortages and hurdles we've seen and are hearing from campgrounds the last year and a half, those pain points where they're kind of struggling to meet customer service expectation and demand can really be helped and alleviated by a lot of this stuff, which I think is a really valuable tool to explore if you're struggling to build the core team that will achieve the level you want of service.
If they could ever integrate that AI stuff with dynamic pricing. I mean, Cara, how many phone calls did you get saying, how much is it tonight?
Yeah.
Like, how much is tonight?
Like it will come. Like we've been in discussions with CampSpot, for example, with their API, not about this specific thing, but it's crossed my mind many times where I said to them, like, that needs to happen as a step, right? Because right now, if anybody asks about booking or pricing, it will display the CampSpot link and send them right there. Right. Instead of discussing pricing, because it's dynamic. We don't want them to do that, right? And say it's $45 and then they check and it's $85.
Yeah.
But
but COVID and dynamic pricing, dynamic pricing probably would have never hit the campgrounds if it wasn't for COVID.
Not in the broad sense that it has. Yeah. Like, I think those top tier guys that were really pioneering that would have done it anyway. But yeah, it really has pushed properties to embrace it.
And people say, campgrounds don't, they shouldn't do that. Well, you know what? Airlines do it. Hotels do it.
Everybody does it.
Supply and demand.
And compared to Eleanore, like, I don't want to discount the RV industry here, right? And Susan too. Like, this is very good for technicians and information too, because this thing knows all of, like, it doesn't know current model RVs as of right now. It will very soon. But if you have a pre-2021 model and you're saying, like, this is wrong with my RV, how do I fix it? Maybe it's something very easy that they don't have to take it to a tech for, and then that tech can be available for somebody who actually does need them instead of wasting 2 hours trying to track down a problem. Yeah. So this is stuff that helps the RV industry and dealers tremendously too if they're willing to adopt it. Like, I could program an RV service bot right now.
Yeah, I mean, that person that's spending most of their time answering these questions with consumers that the bot can do it on, you could take that time and put them out into the campground, or even train them to be that mobile tech. They could be better used somewhere else and keep the everyday nuisances, not nuisances, but you know what I mean.
You can say, like, have the bot say, like, I don't think you can handle this on your own. Maybe you should book an appointment. Here's a link for the dealership.
Yeah, that repetitive kind of on the phone. I used to have 3 or 4 girls sitting behind a desk in the early 2000s, sitting behind a desk answering the same questions over and over and over all day long for 8-hour shifts. I mean, to alleviate all of that would be huge savings. Huge.
Well, there's a big application for the dealers, because the problem we all know is we sold so many RVs the last 3 years.
Got to fix them.
All these new people. They've owned an RV. They've never been in a campground. And how many calls do the dealers get to say, Do I have to winterize my RV, or how do I winterize my? There's so many of those items that could be automated and on the website and ready to go.
Send me a dealer, Bob and John, and I'll do one for free for them to show a use case.
What's that?
I'll do a bot for free for a dealer if you send me one and find me one who's willing to be a test pilot. And
I can plenty.
Use case.
Yeah.
Yep. And Eleanor, I'm sure that another thing that's an issue in Canada, maybe not as big as the U.S., is consolidation of dealerships. Where in the U.S. now, what do we got? Five mega companies,
and we are, by the way, over. Like, I'm willing to continue, but if anybody has to drop off, please feel free to go ahead and do it.
But we have to drop off in 2 more hours because we got to do our other show.
Well, that's fine. I don't do anything all day anyway.
We have 2 more hours, but yeah, consolidation. We're seeing it as well. I mean, obviously not to the same degree. I think the largest group in Canada has about 40 dealerships, the Leisure Days group, and then the next one down has maybe 12. But it definitely has pros and cons, right? But on both sides. I mean, they can streamline and become more efficient themselves. But then it sometimes is harder for the smaller dealership in that area that's competing with them.
Well, it shouldn't be though, Eleanor, and Brian can attest to this from a marketing standpoint. I wrote an article in October 21 for RV Pro, and I called it David versus Goliath. Now, it wasn't beating up on the mega dealers, and why there is always going to be a place for an independent dealer, a small business person. And one of the sentences I put in the article, which I'm surprised I got very little kickback on. In fact, I don't think I got any, because I expected Marcus Lemonis to call me the next morning, because I said that every RV dealer should go to bed at night and hope that Marcus Lemonis opens up a Camping World store across the street tomorrow morning.
Right.
And they didn't pick it, but it's the truth. They build the market. They bring more people into the market. They're big. They have to go by corporate rules. They screw up more people. They piss off more people.
And they move slower.
The person looks across the street and they see the small dealership. They go in. They greet them by name. That's business. But if you're not going to market that, and if you're not going to show people that you are different, if you're going to hide under your desk because there's a mega dealer down the street, then get out of the business.
But that's the difference today. Go ahead, Susan.
Camping World uses that dealership for parts that they can't get fast enough. So sometimes that independent dealership, their biggest customer is Camping World.
It's very true. You're right. I've got dealers like that. Yep.
But that's the thing too. Like, right, if the playing field is more level now with all the technology and the marketing and things that I can do for a small, like, there's big, huge companies that I know of very clearly who don't do anywhere near the marketing that I can do for a 20 or 80 site campground, because they either move slow or they've got people who have degrees that are 20 years old and haven't adapted with technology. And so a lot of this stuff has leveled the playing field to where 5-10 years ago, you needed somebody from a franchise perspective, or like you couldn't buy the bulk radio ads, the bulk TV ads, but now you can do Facebook. Of course you can.
Yep.
So
many changes coming up.
But I think they're all great. Like, I really like some of them, maybe not, but I think most of them are great, depending on if you adopt them, if you can adapt to them, if you can use them and use them to your advantage. I mean, it's part of the reason we're doing this Insider Perks Marketing Basecamp podcast, right? Like, I'm basically doing 300 plus episodes every single day that talk about how to do something with marketing. And maybe that's just like Harvestos, right? That's not going to take away my customer, because if you want me to do the things for you that are super high level, you're going to hire me. But if you want to do that yourself, you were never my customer to begin with. Great. I'd rather you have the knowledge and do it right and succeed.
Brian, I'm sure you'd agree that a lot of campground owners think of marketing as something that you do when you don't have enough business.
Yes.
And only then. Mm-hmm. And the reality is you do it when you do have business, and just keep that.
Right, but especially because they don't understand why their business is there sometimes. Like the pipeline workers, for example. That's very easy to see why they're in the area. But how do you know? Like, what's going to happen? They could be gone tomorrow. So are you just going to wait to market until they all evacuate because the pipeline got shut down or something?
Wait for the next hurricane and get the electrical guys in. Yeah.
Yeah. I also think there's a lot to be said for keeping that brand awareness stuff alive, continuing to drive consumer interest in, that park's always full, so it must be awesome. So I want to go there. but I can't know that about that park unless I know the park's there and it's being marketed to me. So I think keeping those that kind of hot excitement around your park, even when it's busy, is really valuable to maintaining.
Yeah, I could talk about this for hours, but I do think we should wrap up and be respectful of people's time.
Yeah.
So we are having a good conversation as always. So,
although I did check,
from
Boston
words?
to Calgary is 2,500 miles.
I'll see you
Good RV trip.
Stampede, come on, let's go, guys.
Good RV trip.
See you then, July 6th.
Eleanor's going to be here.
Yeah. July 6th. Come on down.
You know, I got Alberta mixed up with Manitoba.
Uh-oh.
I was only two provinces over. I totally forgot about Saskatchewan.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for appearing on another episode of MC Fireside Chats. Bob, John, thanks for being
Thank
our
you very
special
much.
guest.
Thanks for having us.
This is a great show. Again, if you guys don't know who Bob and John are, make sure you tune into their show. What time's your show tonight, Bob and John?
7 o'clock Eastern time.
And on the Facebook page for NERVDA?
Facebook.com/RVDA.
Awesome. So check out their show. Check out Campers Report. We appreciate you guys. Susan, Eleanor, Cara, as always. We will see you next week for another show.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching this episode of MC Fireside Chats, hosted by Brian Searl and Cara Csizmadia. Have a suggestion for a future show or want to see your campground or company as part of an episode? Email us at hello@moderncampground.com. Join us next week for another episode. And don't miss the latest outdoor hospitality news and commentary from around the world at moderncampground.com.